G'day everyone, it's Two Ordinary Cops. We are back. Damo, mate, how are you?
Good, mate. Good. What's going on in Brisbane?
Oh, mate, not a lot. Just working and fitting in time to do these recordings, which is always a good catch up for us. And mate,
Yeah.
I hear we've got a bit of news from the territory, or a bit of I suppose, a link between people that live down your way, and are friends with you, and also me.
Yeah, we got a cracking little shout out. So we all know I live between Armadale and Grafton up in Hanani, Ebor, that sort of area there on a little property. And the Ebor pub's my local. So I've mentioned Big Dog before. He's a fan of the show. And his wife, Kelly, they live at the Dutton Trout Hatchery at Ebor. And they've been there forever. They're really good people, just salt of the earth, really part of the community. Anyway, they've got a couple of kids there, and they've got twin girls who are both 17. And I had a chat. We were at the pub one night, and Rubes is there, and Ruby's one of the girls and it was Ruby and Charlie are the twins, and Ruby's heading up to the Northern Territory as a Jillaroo. And anyway, I sort of got her onto the podcast, and she's listened to a few. And anyway, I got word the other day that she's starting at Mount Riddick Station, which is around the Hearts Range, so east of Alice Springs, out towards the Queensland border. And anyway, I was in the pub the other day getting a box of beer as you do, and Kelly and Paul were both there, so Big Dog and Kel, and they both said, "Oh yeah, Ruby landed in Alice Springs, and she said you actually, it's just everything that Damo said it was." So she obviously had a bit of an experience in Alice and saw the caliber of the joint. And anyway, I had a hell of a laugh at that, and obviously I knew she was going up there to be a Jillaroo on Mount Riddick Station near Hearts Range, which is a fantastic thing to do for young people. You just can't beat it. Like, you've got to really grow up and become independent out there, and you use your initiative, and you learn how to solve problems without support, and it's just going to be excellent for her. She's a fantastic. They're all both of them. They're all fantastic kids, but they're very innocent kids coming from the sleepy little hollow of Ebor, and out of high school locally and all the rest of it. And now they're out and about, and she's up in the territory. And yeah, she got a bit of a shock when she went to Alice. But we were just having a chat about that. And I said, "Oh, I better give little Rubes a shout out." She's had a look at Alice Springs, and I think she said one of the things that Kelly said today is apparently she watched a cop get hit over the head with a bong or something. And I think my response was, "God, I miss Alice." So yeah. Yeah, she's a wild show. That poor little innocent kid from down in northern New South Wales lands in Alice Springs and just gets a bloody absolute introduction. So that was good to hear. But she's a very clever kid. She'll work her way out. She said she didn't feel unsafe, but she certainly had her wits about her. So that was quite good. But yeah, where she's actually working, Mount Riddick Station, it's out the Plenty Highway heading back towards Queensland. So for those playing along, you go north of Alice Springs and then turn right on the Plenty Highway, which is a dirt road that runs from the centre of the NT, being the Stewart Highway, all the way across to Boulia in Queensland, so far western Queensland. And the cattle stations out there, they're interspersed with Aboriginal communities, and it's really is the middle of nowhere. You're just out in the absolute middle of nowhere. But we're having a chat about it, Schultzy, and you've got a little connection to Mount Riddick Station.
Well, I do, mate. So we've mentioned Matt James before. He owns Distant Curb. It does telecommunications up in Northern Territory, and I was helping him. One of his first projects was actually running telecommunications out to Atitra, which is just past Hearts Range, or just past the Hearts Range police station, and in that area is actually Mount Riddick Station. And I met Steve, I believe his name is.
Yeah, Steve
Um,
Cadzo. Yep.
yeah. So I met Steve. He was obviously friends with Matt because I was out there helping him a couple of years ago, and we had to get because what Matt does, he doesn't put huge towers up. He puts towers up on the top of mountains, so he uses the natural landscape to actually bounce the beam, which is quite ingenious, really. And we needed a bit of a hand to get some of this stuff right up on top of one of the mountains. So he kindly flew us up and actually dropped like these batteries and solar panels and all this sort of stuff actually up on one of the mountains. So yeah,
From a
I've met him
helicopter.
a
Yeah.
couple of times. Um,
Yeah, from a helicopter. You didn't mention
yeah,
how he did
yeah,
it. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I've actually, I was just showing Damo, I was just showing you a video of the helicopter when we took off from the mountain because we were absolutely hooking it. It was only just enough he could fly up there because it was pretty windy, and yeah, yeah, we took off the mountain, and I'll tell you what, it's one of the fastest. It's faster than a roller coaster, mate. We were flying down with the wind.
Yep.
Coming down, we were a couple of 100 meters up in the air, so it's
Well, mate, the video footage looked like an SAS patrol about to slam into some hill in Afghanistan. So it was pretty desolate country. I don't know how a cow gets a feed out there. There's not much to chew on, but yeah, it's a great thing. But I think the beauty of this is too is that I'm a huge supporter of young kids from down here where it's all very civilized and you've got everything you want. You know, Armidale's, we say we're in the middle of nowhere. Well, Armidale's only an hour away and it's a major centre, and Coffs Harbour's only an hour and a half away and it's a huge centre. So we are not in the middle of nowhere. If you want to see the middle of nowhere, you go to Harts Range, you go to Mount Riddick Station. That is the middle of nowhere. So, and I know there's big stations up to the north, off to the west, around the Victoria River and into WA, and that's probably the ultimate in Australia as far as just complete and utter isolation. But where young Ruby's gone, it's extremely isolated, so she's going to have a ball out there. It's just you got to just live on what you got. So, yeah,
Exactly, mate. Look, I'll just give a shout out to the Hearts Range. Uh, they got the races as well. They have that on once a year, and that's a quite a big event. They have the camp draft, and then they have the races. So it's well worth going out there. I was out there for the races last time, and even that got quite eventful, mate. I had to actually put my police hat on at one stage because the poor night patrol were getting a bit outnumbered with one of the fights that was going on, and I managed to settle it all down actually to the point that they came and thanked me the next day, the night patrol. So they said, yeah, if it wasn't for you, it could have really got out of control. So
oh yeah, it's an absolute old school Western movie, but with modern smartphones. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's a show. But that's what we love. That's the beauty of the territory. It is still wild, and that you think about those places we went to, and mate, you just have to make do. Like you're in the middle of nowhere, and that's what a lot of people just don't comprehend how isolated we're talking.
yep,
Both of us served in Borroloola. Um, Borroloola is 700 kilometres from Catherine, and that is the nearest Woolies.
yeah,
Sure, there's a local store and there's this and there's that, and you can always get by. But like, if you wanted to do a decent shop, if you want to go to, to a major, if your nearest Bunnings is Darwin, it's so
yes,
you're 1,000 kilometres from Bunnings,
yep,
and that's a big deal to me because I do love Bunnings. So it's you've got to really think about the level of isolation. We're talking about sitting in cars doing 130 kilometres an hour for 7 hours.
yep,
Well, for probably 5 hours the way we drive, but
yep,
it is what it is. It's a
yeah,
it's a really. I know a lot of people listening going, yeah, we understand that. We know you're a long way away, but it really is in the middle of nowhere. And bringing it back to policing, that means that if you get yourself in a pickle, um, their backup is a bloody long way away. You
exactly.
know, the nearest other police to Borroloola really are Avon Downs.
Yep,
What are
that'd
they?
be it.
300 kilometres down the Tablelands Highway, which is rough as buggery, heading
Yep,
due south from Heartbreak Hotel, which is already 100 kilometres from Borroloola.
Borroloola.
So
Yep,
that your nearest backup by road is 400 kilometres away. Admittedly, you do have Queensland Police in Doomadgee, and they're about the same. They're about 350, 400 k's away, but they're flat out too. They can't come screaming to your help.
no,
So really, your only hope is to keep your wits about you and be able to disengage from a major incident. If you get in a really critical situation, you've got no backup. You need to disengage, and that's what we've spoken about before. Because
yep,
we're talking massive distances, and I think it was just thinking about little old Ruby, little innocent Rubes,
yeah,
all the way out there at Mount Riddick Station. She'll be fine. She's got her wits about her. She's her parents are absolute legends, so she'll be fine. But she's in the middle of nowhere.
yeah. And mate, she's with good people.
She's with excellent people, and that's
Yeah,
the thing. And everyone looks after each other, and you're in the middle of nowhere, and it's the attitudes towards people are different. People are very accommodating in those areas.
Yep.
And, that's the same all through Western Queensland, Western New South Wales, all through the NT, Northern South Australia, I would say all of WA. It just people out in the middle of nowhere, country Victoria, and all of Tassie. Tasmanians are fantastic. I really like Tassie people.
Yeah.
So it's you get right out of those cities, and all of a sudden everyone pulls together and works together, and there's a reason why two police can handle a major incident in an area like that is because they've forged those relationships previously,
Yeah.
and they've got people there to help and go. Listen, we're not going to go and fight these guys, but we just need a bit of support here, and people just step up. You can't beat those people out in the bush.
No, but mate, that's exactly right. And like Kalkaringi, we had all the cattle stations around there, even Larger Manu and all that sort of thing. And they're a great group of people. And I've got a few funny stories, probably some that I shouldn't really repeat on the podcast. But
Oh, they're the best ones. Go on, Schultzy. It's all good.
um, no, like they're really good people. All the ringers out there, you get to know them really well. And also, I mean, we had the added advantage when you had work date in those places. A lot of time around Christmas time when they weren't working, they come into town. But if there was any play up with any of the ringers, you could just about walk down the street and call them by name, and they would listen to you because they knew that you knew the station manager, and they didn't want to get in trouble with them. So it
Oh
was,
yeah, I think I've told a story about Catherine, 2009 Catherine show weekend. So the Catherine show weekend, and I mean all those little places. The show weekend is a big deal. They have the rodeo. I think they had a camp draft as well. Obviously the show's going on, so you got 3 days of the show, and every night there's something on. And all these people, these young people, they're coming out off the stations. They're all been working really hard. And you've got to remember too, you've got different, very diverse groups of people up there. So you've got
yeah,
your ringers out on the stations who are not always, but generally, you've got Aboriginal ringers and you've got a lot of Caucasian ringers, and they're pretty rough knockabout. They operate out in the scrub. They're tough people. They don't get much chance to spend their money. They don't make a hell of a lot of money, but when they do, when they do get to come to town, they're pretty well cashed up because they haven't spent it on anything.
yeah,
So you get them into town. You've got your local Indigenous people who are just there all the time, and they're around all the time. You've got your little bit of your element of criminality that exists in those communities, and they might, race isn't really relevant to them, but they're about as well. And when you get that melting pot together and you add a lot of alcohol and you might add a day or two of time to build up tension, I'll never forget, and I think I've already said it. I think I've told the story, but and I was pretty junior, like 2009. I was off probation, but I was still only 2 years in the job. And Catherine, it could go off, and I mean, we all know that all of the centres in the territory and anywhere can go off, but this particular night, Catherine went off like a bomb, and the irony was that we were already at crime scenes. I was at one crime scene. There was another crime scene in Catherine. So I was at a crime scene in Catherine South. There was a crime scene in Catherine North, and that's the two units tied up. The shift sergeant was just conducting patrols and doing the odd thing and lifting the odd drunk and taking it back to the watch house. Anyway, we get this, and then this is back in the days before sort of universal comms through Darwin. So we used to run our own local comms. Front counter member goes, boys, I wasn't going to bother you, but I've had about 15 triple O calls from bloody the front of Kirby's, which is the Catherine Hotel right in the main drag. And they said, we're going to have to get someone there. Like, apparently the whole town is fighting out the front of Catherine Hotel. So anyway, our shift sergeant, to his credit, he gets on the radio and says, well, I need one person mobile in the vehicle from that crime scene and that crime scene. So we're going to roll into town with 3 vehicles. We're going to triangulate around the shit fight, and we're just going to sort it out. And we turned up, and without exaggeration, there was at least 300 people in the main street of Catherine, so Patterson Terrace. Oh no, that's Tennant Creek. I can't remember. Catherine Terrace, right through the middle,
Terrace, mate. Yeah,
where we're right in the middle. It's a Stuart Highway. It's just called Patterson Terrace. It's called Patterson
yeah,
Terrace is Tennant Creek. It's called
yeah.
Catherine Terrace. So anyway, we're right in the middle of it, and anyway, I just looked up and went, there's just brawls everywhere. There's no way we're going to fix it, but maybe the presence will stop things. And that was that melting pot. All those people from all over the territory, all mixed in one little area and cashed up, full of booze, and something lit the spark, and everything went off. And oh my God, we were making arrests, and people getting thrown in the cage, and then we grabbing another bloke, and the cage door hadn't been closed properly, and someone ran out and ran away, and Another bloke's just feeding a fella uppercuts, and he got tasered, and it turns out he was 17, which created another shit show. Oh, it was a show. It was an absolute menace. None of us got injured, but we certainly got bustled around. But yeah, we made lots of arrests that night, and it was like, what else have you got? Like, seriously, we already had 2 crime scenes. We had people in custody for stabbing people, and the jobs kept coming, not just in the main centre. Catherine's a busy place. There's domestics rolling in. There's bloody talks of burnouts in cars. The place is going off, and we're just dealing with it as it rolls in. You just roll with the punches, literally,
Yep.
and yeah, good times, eh, Shelty?
Oh, mate, definitely. I've got one. When we actually finally get round to talking about complaints against police, I've actually got a cracker story, which is one of those nights where it just turned to shit.
Yeah,
But I'm going to say that one, mate, because that will probably take me quite a while to tell. It's quite a big story.
no, that's
Um,
fair.
but mate, what we're actually going to talk about today is emergency services, and the reason we're going to talk about this, mate, I've got a bit of bee in my bonnet, because unfortunately, I live in a city and I have to listen to a lot of dickheads talking in the media and all this sort of stuff, and they're talking about these floods, which are happening up north because we had a cyclone. And then now it's a depression, especially up around Ingham, Cairns, Townsville. There's a lot of flooding around up there. But they're all jumping up and down because basically more, and we're not a political podcast, but it really pissed me off because they want to make it political, and it's not. So what I want to do is actually especially, I mean, all the police would know this, but for the people that aren't police, I just want to let you know the last thing that emergency services want when there's a disaster is bloody politicians. The furthest
Oh
they can be
God, yeah.
away, the better. So,
No, oh mate, yeah, absolutely.
I thought what we could do is actually just teach people what it's like. I mean, I did. I've been out in communities when they're doing floods. I mean, Ramangini, we had a Category 5 cyclone and then a Category 3 within a month of each other. Basically, both came across the community while I was out there. And and mate, did I ever speak to the chief minister? Nah. Did I want to speak to the chief minister? Nah. Bloody hell.
No.
It's so, mate. What I might you're probably, because you're doing a lot of training around emergency services and all that sort of thing, and you've worked a bit higher up in emergency services. So I thought I'd hand over to you to actually just give people a bit of understanding of what it's like.
Yeah, so obviously politicians are elected officials, and they're the ones who get in the parliament and they debate different legislation and they enact legislation. That's what's called an act of parliament. Australia operates by the rule of law, as do most democratic countries around the world, which means that there's no person in charge who just says, "We'll do this, do that." No, 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 no. There's a vote in Parliament that um, creates legislation that sits there, which is an instruction on how things are to be done. It's an instruction that gives certain powers to different organisations. So the police in the Northern Territory, and every jurisdiction in Australia is different because we are a federation of states. So in the Northern Territory, and the territory is a bit different because it's a territory, um, we have the ability. They've got what's called the Police Administration Act. That act covers what the police do and what powers they have to do in certain circumstances. There are other powers given by other acts of parliament, like the Criminal Code Act and things like that. That allows the police, and I mean, we only speak about police because that's what we are. We're the two ordinary cops, but
Yeah.
those same powers are given to different groups of organisations that have certain functions within society. So the parliament, which are your politicians who you stand up and talk on the radio as talking heads and all the rest of it, and who are elected by you, they get together and they make the laws. They don't then come out and run the problem on the ground. God forbid.
Yeah.
What they do is they just have a debate. They're elected and they create the rules with a lot of input from specialists and after engagement with stakeholders like like senior police officers and lawyers and everything else. A legal officer, so a lawyer, drafts the legislation. Politicians read the legislation and then have a debate on it, make sure they're happy with it, and then they enact the actual piece of legislation. And that's the end of that.
Yep.
Within a lot of those, that we have the separation of powers, which we've spoken about before. So the politicians are not the executive; they don't operate immediately as the government. So what happens is you've got these organisations in when a major incident hits the ground, such as major catastrophic flooding, where departments like, well, of course, police are involved, but it's not. It's in protection of life and property. It's not to do with enforcement of law necessarily. Obviously, that will take place if it needs to, but it's more about you've got people on the ground protecting life and property. With SES, we call them the storm carrots. The SES go out there, the storm people. You've got Queensland Fire Department would have, I think they used to anyway, have swift water rescue crews. So you've got all that sort of thing. These people don't need a politician to tell them what to do. They literally have systems in place. They just respond. Their executive management will escalate where they need to. And there are also acts of parliament in place that allow them to escalate beyond the ability of the state. So, in a situation where the local resources of whatever particular emergency service have been exhausted in that particular incident, they can make an application through different acts of parliament, and not just state parliament, but also federal parliament, that allow for the federal government to bring federal resources to bear, like the military and things like that. And I must reiterate, the army is not there to save people in floods. They are excellent because you've immediately got a big group of deployable people who can come in there and help. But you've got to use the military with very tight objectives. So we like to keep it within emergency services. Beyond that, they can request the assistance of interstate forces that can send police or emergency service personnel or specialists that can be deployed in and help out in an emergency. The people who you absolutely do not require one bit is a bloody politician. So
Yep.
politicians using each other for bait. Okay, something's gone wrong. There's a big flood in North Queensland. Well, systems are already in place that dictate how the local people are responsible for dealing with that will deal with it. If they need assistance, they will request assistance through existing legislation that will gain that assistance from other sources out and about. The only thing I can see that politicians can potentially do is call an emergency meeting of Parliament and actually come up with a short term measure that allows, for example, emergency funding for certain things. It might be that they enact something through a lot of legislation has trigger points that enact other things within other pieces of legislation without delivering a law degree, which I don't have anyway, so I can't deliver. um, there are certain things that the minister must do this, the premier must do this. So that's fine. That's sort of bringing in a politician to just sign off on something as the elected official. But realistically, they should just be providing support in whatever means they can, as far as like, do you need further resources? Do you need my assistance in ringing someone or blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is the local emergency services rip into it.
Yep.
What happens is people politicise this to win votes, and that to me is just ridiculous because you're capitalising on a natural disaster that no one's the blame for. If things aren't getting there immediately, it might be that a few more resources are required, which also brings up another point where politicians do come into play, and that's where ministers cut budgets of emergency services and other services like that, and funnel that funding to other areas, which may deplete the ability to respond. But when it comes to operational response, politicians have nothing to do with it.
No, that's right.
The only thing I've ever seen politicians do during operational response is turn up in the operations centre and actually stand there for a photo op.
Yeah.
But as far as their input goes, it was generally very unwelcome and certainly not required.
Yeah.
So I just want to explain that's the difference. Like the politicians aren't to blame for this. There's no, they're not, it's not their job. The job is of the operational executive management on the ground who are running this on behalf of those specifically legislated organisations that have the power and the actual authority to deal with these matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Mate, you know what it reminds me, to put it in simplest terms, what it reminds me of, I remember when one of our commissioners got jailed. Anyway, he had to stand down, so we didn't actually have a commissioner. We had the deputy stood up or whatever it was. But I remember when he got sacked or something like that. Anyway, I remember one of the just the local workers in the police, and that, oh, what's going to happen? Like, you haven't got a commissioner. I said, nothing's going to change. We
No,
all
of
know what
course
we're
we've got a
doing.
commissioner.
We've all got, it just because we haven't got a commissioner sitting at the top for like a week or whatever, nothing changes in the police force. We've all got
Yeah,
our legislation and we act on it. That's the commissioner has very little to do with day to day policing.
yeah, exactly right. Um,
So
it used to come down to I don't know. I do see a fair bit of um, higher level personnel. Okay, I'll relate it back. I work for Fireground Proprietary Limited, which is an RTO based in Dorrigo. I've mentioned what I do now a couple of times, but I haven't mentioned the organisation. So we actually we train a lot of people in all different levels of firefighting and other things as well. But one thing we do teach is the ability, especially when we're training crew leaders, we train them to stand back, direct the objectives. So operate through objectives. Say, right, mission success looks like this. What I require my crew to do is we're going to light a line here. The way I want this done is blah 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 blah. Then let the people do their job. That goes up then to a sector commander just above that crew leader who might have a number of crew leaders underneath them, and they say, right, the situation is this. We need this whole area is to be backburnt, and as a result, this crew will start here, this crew will start here. There might be specific instructions like we're not going to light up before this time, 1200 hours, because of favourable wind conditions, whatever else. But then you don't tell your crew leaders how to light a drip torch. You let them do their job. That
yeah,
goes all the way to the top. The job of, I would even go lower than commissioner. I would even go the job of a commander in a situation where you've got a major incident like that. Probably a bad example, maybe assistant commissioner, because commanders generally will be an incident controller for a major issue like that. Their job is to go, you are the incident controller for this particular incident. You're in charge and you have the backing of a full emergency operations center, which is a system that's already been put in place.
yeah,
Your job is to achieve this. The intent of the territory controller, who is and I'm relating it back to territory police, but the intent of the Northern Territory controller is that minimum loss of property and protection of life. So do what you need to do that. It might be that, right, so in order to protect life, we need to evacuate. So, you'll be given a very big intent. Your commander's intent is this, and you operate from there. From there, they may develop their intention, which is a little bit more specific. So, from a commander level, which is still very much an oversight position, you're not on the ground getting dirty. You're sitting in a room with lots of information coming and going, and your job might be right. The intent today is to completely evacuate all outstations north of Ramingining for this far and the community of Manangrita due to the fact that impact from this cyclone is going to occur now. The cyclone comes down, right, the intention today is to do this, bang, 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 and you step it back. So you set a very big intention that gives your guys on the ground the flexibility to come up with their own creative solution to the problem. You might give them left and right of arc. It might be that you don't have use of aircraft, or you do have use of these particular aircraft. However, we will put those aircraft where they are prioritised and where they are needed most. So that's the stuff of way up. One thing that's been massively learnt over recent years through disasters, being probably for a long time, but especially around the 2009 Black Saturday fires in Victoria, and obviously recently the 2019-2020 fires, was that public information is a massive thing. So getting the information out to the public as to what they need to do needs to be, especially in the age of social media, needs to be one of the absolute main objectives. So as a result, there's a public information officer role within the emergency operations or the incident management team setup. So out of that, it is a huge job of the person in charge to be feeding information back from the information you're getting up from the crews on the ground to then feed back to the population, to the citizens, so that they can have informed decisions. They can make the informed decisions about the best way to handle their individual problem. So we can relate this to what's going on in northern Queensland right now. It would be that there would be an emergency operations centre established somewhere up there. It might be that it's not within the impact zone itself. I have no idea. I'm just saying how I would respond to a situation like this. That incident would be controlled by an incident controller who would be a very high ranking person in some particular emergency service. They would be given the full resources of the local area government resources, plus resources from outside the local area, but still within the state of Queensland. and their role would be an intention from the state controller who would be going, my intention is this, and those people will enact the state controller's intention, develop their own strategic intentions, and have that carried out by the troops on the ground. In this meantime that they're actually conducting the operations on the ground, they've got a logistical component completely backing that up. They've got a planning component coming up with what's going to happen in the future. What does tomorrow look like? They're coming up with plans that need to be enacted tomorrow and getting those plans operationalized through the operations cell. But one of the major ones, like I just mentioned, is that public information section, and they would be pumping information out through various systems that exist and through the media to the population to protect life and property to achieve that strategic goal. All of this that I've been talking about has already been developed and planned in what we call the AIMS system. It's the Australasian Interagency Incident Management System is what AIMS stands for. And that's a system that's in place. So all the politicians need to really do in a situation like this and go, hey, incident controller, what do you need? Or not even, hey, state controller, is there any way that we can assist you in any way? And they
Yep.
might come back with the incident controller has requested this, or that some emergency funding be provided to people. So you quickly run something through the cabinet, through Parliament, and enact a short-term act of Parliament that allows for emergency relief funding or something similar. But when it comes to operational response on the ground, politicians got nothing to do with it. One
Yep.
thing I suggest that they probably could do is turn up and show moral support by being on the ground and walking amongst the people. They don't really need to. I mean, obviously, they'll go to the EOC and go, you guys are doing a fantastic job. And that's about the limit. And maybe put on a morning tea so the guys can have a feed. That's
Yep.
about it. Realistically, they're a completely separate arm of government and they don't need to be there.
Yeah, but mate, that's exactly right. And like, what you actually explained there, which is dead right. So when the cyclones are come across, basically the information I've got, they sit there and go, look, we need this, this, and this. How you achieve it, we don't really care. If you need any assistance, let us know. And that's it. So all the calls when people had to stay inside and everything was done by me. So they give me that authority to make those calls. And when I deem it safe and all that sort of thing, I haven't got a politician over my shoulder or even a boss over my shoulder telling me what to do. They sit there and go, "This is our objective. This is what we need done, and we'll leave it up to you to how you achieve it." So,
Yeah, and the other thing there is, but they're an up report. So your job would then be to set the objective to the troops below you to actually be the
yep,
hands on the ground to achieve that objective. And then a major thing that you would do would be feeding information up the chain, including requests for support. Right.
yep,
The incident is we've got this, this, this. These are the problems we're having. We're currently doing this. We require support in relation to this, this, this. We need these resources. The reason we need these resources is this, this, this. So if you report up from your level as the local controller on the ground in a major incident, you feed that up to the area controller or whatever as it steps up through that AIM system.
yep,
Then all of a sudden, the emergency operations center has gone. The local controller from here is currently dealing with this. This is the threat that they've got. To work towards the local objective, they are currently doing this. In order to achieve that objective, they have requested this. Logistics: are we able to get that to that person? It may be
yep,
that they can't. It might be that the resources simply aren't there. Okay, no worries. We then go, right, we don't have that. We need to change our plan. It might be that no, that we're holding them back for this. It's like, well, no. You deal with the incident you got, not the one you might have. So that's where it's no. Those resources need to get out there. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we've cracked open a big old bucket of money here. We're going to get it on an aircraft. Do we have an aircraft possible? No, we don't. Right, that is outside the scope of the states or the territory in this circumstance. Therefore, what do we have sitting at Tyndall? Potentially, we have a C-130J aircraft sitting there who can take that equipment out. So it might be that we get onto the Defence Force, put through a request for support. So it's what's called a Defence Force aid to the community, a DFAC request. And then a C-130J goes mobile out of Richmond Air Base down here, flies up to Tyndall, loads up with what it needs to do, and flies out to see you and offer that aid. So that's where it's a really robust system, and I really like it because it works brilliantly and it's tried and tested.
yep.
It's not like this is Australia's first rodeo when it comes to a natural disaster.
I know we've had one or two.
No, just a couple.
and
So yeah,
and
I know this isn't a lot to do with policing. Police certainly have a role within that, but most of that is supporting the primary agencies. And then the beauty of that multi-agency, so when you're talking all of government response and also contractors and private enterprise engaging as well, is that you've got a single point of control. There's one person in charge, and they're
Yeah.
accountable for the whole thing. You've got a beautifully well practiced structure sitting directly under the controller, um, and that system works really well. Different agencies within the government take on those different roles. So you can expand an emergency operations center. Obviously, operations are right up there. Planning, logistics, public information. They're sort of your top four. But then we had welfare, transport, animal welfare, all kinds of other sectors that come underneath that primary incident management team. And all of them work solely on what they're dealing with, but they all answer to the incident controller. And the beauty of that, the incident controller can delegate away jobs as they come in. And I know I say animal welfare. Well, that might be an enormous thing when it comes to massive flooding within pastoral areas. So if you've got massive flooding in rural areas, you're talking about lots and lots of livestock that are potentially under threat. So animal welfare might come in there and go, right, we need massive numbers of road trains ready to move stock out of a particular area. Well, you've got funding, logistics controller funding. So here's the money to do that. Transport, we require 10 road trains to come to this location. Bang, bang. We need contract musterers to get cattle in from here. Bang. And it'll all just be paid for and organised below the incident controller. But he sets the objective. The
Yeah.
objective in that particular instance be right. Your particular mission right now is to recover as much of that livestock from this particularly affected area as we can prior to the impact of the event, so that we, in order to prevent the massive loss of livestock. So that's and then that objective is palmed down and it's dealt with at the lower level. So the incident controller can go back to dealing with the next shiny object that pops up.
Yeah, that's it. And like just to put in there, like it's fluid. So you can plan all you want for a natural disaster, but in the end of the day, the systems are put in place so things can get taken care of. But it's fluid because you never know exactly what's going to happen. So that's why the communication, like you said, the information passed down and up is so important because that's how you change your objectives as they need to, depending on what nature throws at you.
Absolutely. So my favourite objective that I've ever heard of, and listen, any East Timor Interfet veterans from 99, 2000 when Peter Cosgrove was running the show, correct me if I'm wrong. But I have it on very good authority that now General Sir Peter Cosgrove had above his office door where he could look up. So he would sit at his desk in the middle of Dili. He'd look up and he had one very simple statement up the top: a safe and secure East Timor. And that was it. That was his objective. So he could get a flood of information coming at him, and he would go, "What of all this information is going to achieve that?"
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because it's an intent statement. It's an intent statement from the very, very top. A safe and secure East Timor. Well, that
Yep.
then can be farmed down to that is my intent. That is the intent given to me, and that is now what I have to achieve. That is my objective. Do you notice there's no very specific instruction on how to do it?
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, there are rules. There are going to be what are called orders for opening fire. There are lots and lots of guidelines that people who work in these areas are trained to know. They understand that you're going to carry out this role utilizing the legislation and the restrictions and the policies and standard operating procedures that we operate in. We want you to apply your knowledge, taking into consideration all of those restrictions or all of those policies and the way we work to achieve this. So, what they're not telling you is how to do it. So, the
Yep.
beauty of that is that gives the creativity to talented people down the chain to use their initiative and come up with creative solutions to the problem that they have on the ground in order to achieve their objective. And this is applicable to bloody everything. It's applicable to business, to sales, to anything. It can be that, take the civilian example of a sale. It can be like, we're going to teach our salesmen to do this, and this. So, that's great. But what's the intention? The intention might be to sell a car, to sell a house, to sell a machine, to sell anything. That's the intention. Set the intention. That's what you need to achieve. It might be that we want you to do this so many times, which are key performance indicators. That's separate again. But it will be that we don't care how you do it. You know how to do this job. Apply your skills in order to achieve the objective. And that's where I love that command and control aspect. And I think
Yep.
as a society, nothing's ever perfect, but we've got it pretty good. And the beauty of it is that there's always a debrief and after action review component to all of this, and
Well,
that creates continual improvement and learnings. You know, when I was in the army, I was trained how to fight in Vietnam. Well, I was born in 1982. Vietnam finished a long time before that, but they're not trained to do that anymore. My brother
no.
went through gun training last year, and he was trained to fight in Afghanistan and Iraq using, you know, forward operating bases and things like that, and not being out in the bush for long periods of time, and totally different tactics.
Mm,
And I think the biggest thing they learned out of that was learning by objectives. They just give a mission statement, which is success looks like this,
yep.
achieve that. If you need help to achieve that, let us know and we will provide assistance. So that's why it works really well. And
Yeah.
that's why we don't need politicians anywhere bloody near it trying to micromanage things.
Well, and mate, like an important point there, because really a lot of politicians do not know anything about emergency services or emergency management. And that's the thing. You allow it for the people. It's like, say, oh, we're out of Borroloola or, Ramangini. It doesn't matter where you are. They leave it to people like us who are on the ground. We live out there. We know the resources. We know who we can get in contact with. We know the area. We don't want somebody from outside that has no idea of the area coming in and telling us what to do or
Yeah,
how to do it.
absolutely.
Sorry.
And
So,
yeah, you put the system in place and you don't have to mess with the system. The system will work.
yep,
If you let the talented, trained people who are trained to do this and who are on the ground operationally all the time, if in on the of course you have to maintain an oversight, not as a politician, as a person in command within that structure. You certainly have to make sure that things on the ground are being achieved, but you've got to trust your guys to do your job, to do their
exactly.
job.
Yep.
People will amaze you with their talents if you let them do their job.
Well, mate, you actually occasionally have a bit of humour too. I do remember. So what we had Cyclone Lamb come over first. That was a Category 5. It basically knocked down every tree within 100-kilometre radius of Frankenkinney. And I remember when the other one was coming along, we actually had a meeting across the territory, just online, and they cut across to me and they said, oh, well, Sergeant Schultz, I think. They didn't call me Schultzy, but they could have. But you got a lot of important people, and there's probably the chief minister would have been listening as well, but he never spoke much because it's not. He's just there for intel, basically. And anyway, they said, "Oh, any problems out there?" And I said, "Well, one thing we don't have to worry about is any trees falling over because they're already all lying down."
They're
And
all
they
gone.
all had a good laugh.
Yeah. And that's just that coping. That's the coping with it. Like we always say, the best coping mechanism on earth is a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good, and that is so important. Like I don't know some of the footage coming out of North Queensland. Did you see that bloke walking across with that goddamn horse of a barramundi over his shoulder?
No, but I did see a guy walking through the floodwaters with a carton of VB.
God bless his cotton socks. Priorities, eh? I love it.
Exactly.
And the other thing is that people underestimate in government services and all the rest of it, especially when you're all trained up and you're all shiny and newly minted and you're going to go out and save the world. Just remember that the Australian public is extremely resilient and they've got a
Yes.
fantastic, in general, they've got a fantastic sense of humour and they will pull together. And you can harness that. Don't get me wrong, it's an unwieldy beast, but you can harness that momentum to help. And we saw that in the Brisbane floods in 2011. Obviously, it
Yep.
was the Queensland floods, and I'm from Toowoomba, so I'm completely aware of the Toowoomba floods that happened there, and then the Lockyer Valley. But um, Brisbane, the Mud Army just pulled together,
Yep.
which created a logistical nightmare for the emergency services about how we're going to look after these people. But at the end of the day, they volunteered their time to come out there and just scoop mud out of a stranger's house. So never underestimate the resilience and the just the spirit of the
Yep.
Australian people. It's just fantastic.
Oh, exactly, mate. And it doesn't matter whether you're like Toowoomba, Brisbane, or even Ramangini. I still
Yeah.
remember like so many people just getting involved cutting trees, cutting them up, and
Yep.
yeah,
And I would
absolutely.
even say, as a local controller, what you do is you don't try and control it completely. What you do there is you just harness that momentum and direct it gently where you want it to go. So it might even be that you nominate a couple of leaders amongst those just spontaneous volunteers and go, guys, we have to come at this in a coordinated way. We love
Yeah,
your enthusiasm. You're extremely welcome. You're so good. You guys are the best people on earth. But here's what we need. Our
yeah,
objective is this. Let's work towards achieving this. This is the most important thing right now. Right, no worries. And you empower them to do what they can do. I know
exactly.
this is high level. We're not talking about all the little things that can go wrong. We're not getting into that. But there's a way that you can harness that momentum of the population supporting the relief effort to help their fellow man. You harness that, direct it where it needs to go, and just watch amazing things happen.
Exactly. And then if you do that right, all you have to do is tap the rudder from there on in. It's so
Oh
easy.
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, mate, I think
Yeah,
we're almost at our time limit.
I think we're there, buddy. I think we're there.
well,
Yep.
yeah. Well, I suppose next week, mate, I'll be doing it from New Zealand. So I'm going over there for close to a week. So yeah, I might have to get my Kiwi accent going, I think.
Absolutely, bro. Sounds good to me, bro.
Oh, come on, mate.
Sounds
No
good.
need to be like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that'll be good, mate. We'll talk to you over there. But just a shout out, everyone in North Queensland. Take care of yourselves. You know,
Yep.
pull together. We talk about that spirit. I tell you, where there's a lot of spirit is North Queensland, mate. There's a lot of spirit up there, so
Oh,
they'll be
yeah.
fine. They'll pull together. This is not
It,
their
it,
first rodeo. They'll get over it, and they'll
no,
pull together, and they'll be resilient. I mean, I remember a
exactly.
bloke. I saw a video footage of a bloke going right up to a bridge on the Bruce Highway that's been washed out, and just going, "Huh, shit, it is gone." Yep. Yeah, they
Yep.
weren't lying.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we will rebuild. We always
Yeah.
do.
No, they'll be fine, mate. They'll be good. But pull your heads in, stay safe, and yeah, no, good on you.
All right. All right, everyone. Well, I suppose we'll see you all next week. I'll catch you then.
All the best.